William Trimbletoes, he's a good fisherman, catches hens, puts 'em in the pens, wire, blire, limberlock, 3 geese in a flock. One flew east, one flew west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I heard it when I was 5. Grandma Smith was the one that taught it to us. It's about Trickster. It's about McMurphy. It's about the Koshari Indians or the Mudheads or the Hopis. This is a tarot card. This is the Fool, the classic Fool. The Fool that eventually ends up dead because of his foolishness and his devotion to his king and his people. That's a sacred position. I had to report for the draft up here. And I'd also put in an application for a scholarship to Stanford. And I had dislocated my shoulder in wrestling not long before that, so when I let my arm hang, there was a big gap there in the x-rays. And the guy had taken the x-rays, looked at the stuff, and he says, "You don't really want to go in the service, do you?" I said, "No." My life just took a turn and headed down the Bay Area. And we were living with a bunch of other grad students. Area, big level, part of the drug district. Going on the general production. I got here to sit in and they took me to give me these drugs that was on the door. Gave me a nice little chicken wire glass of it, and gave me this stuff. And it did it for like 8 weeks. And I started looking at these guys who were chicken wire window, and I saw that doctors were unaware of something, that their nuts knew quite well. And that part of it was the fact that all this Freudian stuff was below. These guys were in there not because something had happened in the bathroom, something had happened to them in their adult life. The stuff that really made me see the hard side of it in the Cuckoo's Nest fashion was a stuff called, it was IT-290, and there was Ditran, but mescaline itself. Mescaline, when you take mescaline, you begin to see Indian blankets in your mind. You realize this is something to do with not only America today, but with America 1,000 years ago. After I was finished with the experiments, I came back and got a job as an aide. Was put on that very same ward and worked nights there for 9 months. And in the course of the working, I was able to write that book, almost all on the ward. Nurses would come by and say, "Oh, Mr. Kesey, you're typing up your reports again. I'm so proud of you." And I didn't tell them that what I was doing was not only writing about these guys in twisted consciousnesses, but I had joined the ranks of the twisted conscious. But by then, was doing stuff that I had not to be doing. But I knew that I was seeing something really peculiarly American and tragic and glorious at the same time. And so that book really just kind of wrote itself.
It was 1961 that my father received One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in galley form. And he fell in love with the book and bought the rights. He then had the book transformed into a play.
I was anxious to get back on the stage again. I learned a lot from doing that play. It had a big effect on me. I thought, you know, Ken Kesey written this wonderful book. He has to see what they do with it. I invited him to come to Broadway as my guest. He was there in New York, his black tie, and, you know, he never said much about it.
We went to watch Kirk Douglas perform it in New York. Marvelous. It was absolutely marvelous. He was so good at it, at the funky part of it. He was really well built. He just had everything. He could jump rope like you couldn't believe, and he could juggle.
The play was not a big success. People had violent reactions when they saw the play. Some people hated it. How can you show people, what are you making fun of crazy people? It was a subject that was different. They were a little bit startled by it.
I saw it. Great cast, Gene Wilder, Billy Daniels, Ed Ames. But the play only ran about 5 or 6 months, And I actually remember, too, that my father was willing to cut his salary in the play way down to keep it running. Some of the other actors were not willing to do that, and he was sort of angry and said, well, if they don't feel that strongly about it, then fine, let it close.
Then an interesting thing happened. I was on a tour of Europe for the State Department, and I went to Prague, Czechoslovakia at that time, which is a communist country, and I met a young director, Milos Forman. I saw some things that he had done. He was talented, he was young, he had a lot of imagination.
I met Kirk Douglas on a small party at the American Cultural Attaché, and he asked me if he can send me a book, if I would be interested to make a film out of the book. Oh, I said, well, of course, right? And then he left the room, and the book never came.
Then we cut, and I've gone through college on the 5-year program, and we're up to 68, 69. I've started my career. My father has been trying for all these years, 5 years, 6 years, to get the movie made, to get the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, made into a film, to try to find the financing for it.
Kirk Douglas wanted to do it, would sell the rights if he starred in a picture. And we thought then that he was too big a star to be McMurphy. People would be thinking, wasn't Kirk Douglas wonderful?
Dad was getting ready to sell Cuckoo's Nest. He was revamping and had kind of given up and just couldn't get it made. And I said, wow, I said, I love that book. I love that story. I said, let me run with it for a year. Let me try to get it set up.
I said, okay, what can I lose? You go ahead.
Give the kids something to do, keep them out of trouble. Well, the first thing that I did is went back into my father's files, Bryan & Company, and I reviewed all the different people that had approached my father about financing the pictures, different possibilities. And one of these was a company called Fantasy Records out of Berkeley, California.
And we said, yes, we really would like to do it, but told him why we didn't want to use his father as McMurphy, that he became a victim of his own stardom, which happens. And he said, my father's given up.
Saul and I both felt that we loved this book so much that we owed it to Ken Kesey to try to see if he could write a screenplay of his novel. And so we contacted him, and he came on down, and we worked, and then he went off over a period of, I think, 6 to 8 months to write a screenplay. And the ultimate result we felt was that it was still very close to the book.
I felt like the guys that were doing the movie, they wanted to do Hogan's Heroes, and I wanted to do The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I wanted to have things twisted and moving and to give you a feeling of what it's really like to be twisted.
We saw that it wasn't going to be the picture that we thought should be made. He had changed the nurse to someone who wore Valkyrian helmets, and one scene he had her walking down a hallway and she reached out to both walls. It would be a narrow hallway, scraped her with her fingernails and blood ran down.
And in the novel, the chief, the big Indian, told through an hallucinatory style point of view what was going on, and Ken's screenplay maintained that. And Saul and I, rightly or wrongly, felt that it worked well as a literary device, but did not feel we want to watch the movie through this hallucinatory vision.
The chief, he sees through a cracked lens, but the world he's looking at is the real world. He's not just projecting, and it's not just something happening in his skull. It's something he sees out there and sees it as it really is, instead of as his mind creates. His perception is what makes that book jump out of the mundane and into something special. And those first 3 pages of that book, I wrote on peyote. And that's where the Indian character comes from.
It's an unpleasant situation to get into a debate with the novelist, which had happened, and we ended on bad terms, and that's always been in a bad feeling for all of us. We then turned to an old friend of mine, Larry Haubin, who I knew years before, who loved this, who wrote, I thought, a pretty decent draft in terms of structuring it together, and would allowed us the ability to show it to some directors.
10 years later, suddenly I get an envelope from Michael Douglas and Saul Zaentz. And in the envelope is that book Kirk Douglas was talking about, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If I would read it and tell them if I'm interested to make a movie. Well, immediately, after I read it, I said yes, of course. And then, later when I met with Kirk Douglas, he looked at me and said, "You son of a gun. I sent you the book 10 years ago, and you even didn't have a courtesy to, tell me to shove it." And I said, "Kirk, exactly the same thing I thought about you, son of a gun." The moment he left the room, he forgot about it, and I was there hoping, waiting, Well, what happened was he really sent the book, but at the customs, the censors confiscated the book.
Here's a director that I thought might be able to do it almost 10 years earlier, and 10 years later, Michael is saying, "Well, you wouldn't know this guy."
We had Milos fly out to LA, and we went and met up at my house, an old house off of Benedict Canyon. And Milos took our script, and I remember he opened it to the first page, and he told us exactly what he wanted to do. And I'll never forget, I remember Saul and I turned to each other, we started crying, because we thought, here's a man who realizes how much this picture means to us, and he wants to share it with us.
I was wondering why they sent it to me. And then I realized no major studio would finance the film. But Saul Zaentz, stubborn man, and Michael Douglas decided we'll make it. We'll make it as a very low budget film. To make a low budget film, they can't afford a, high priced director. So they needed a director whom they somehow respect and who is cheap. And here I was.
He had the foreign eye, a colder eye, a cooler eye, not colder, where he's a little distant and he could see things that we take for granted. He could see and how funny they really are.
We always thought that, the Cuckoo's Nest had a lot of humor in it, and Saul and I think both felt that the picture, as dramatic as it was, really had some great humor which had to be delicately handled.
It is a Czech movie. This is a movie about society. I just lived 20 years of my life. It's about everything I know. And I know how these people feel.
He understood that the subtleties of institutional power, of a Nurse Ratched.
Well, the first I heard of the possibility of the movie came one day when I learned that Michael Douglas and Saul Zaentz wanted to visit the hospital looking for a site to make this movie. And it would have been much more simple for them to have made it in a Hollywood setting. But I think both of them wanted to see the movie made in a place where real people had lived and died.
We had the extraordinary cooperation of Dr. Dean Brooks, who was the superintendent of the Oregon State Mental Hospital in Salem, and was really willing to work with us on the picture as long as we would use a number of patients, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, for rehabilitation reasons.
Yeah, I was initially opposed to the idea because, in the mental hospital, all the staff are so busy. You have so many things to do. For a doctor especially, you have to assess the patient and treatment plan, and you talk with the families, you talk with agencies, So I had some kind of an anxiety whether it was going to take time away from the staff, especially the doctors.
My only concern was how much would it disturb the functioning of my particular area of the hospital.
I thought it might produce some kind of a circus atmosphere in the hospital campus.
There was opposition. As a matter of fact, my own immediate superior warned me not to do this or not to have anything to do with it.
I had just been elected governor when we were just getting under steam on the movie, and I was able to show my strong support for not only Dean Brooks but also for the movie, the content of the movie itself.
So we had a meeting between the producers and the key people involved in administration, along with the governor. And after a 2-3 hour conference in which we discussed all the pros and cons, the decision was made that Cuckoo's Nest would be filmed in Salem.
People ask me, why on earth would you ever allow the company to come on the grounds of the hospital? Wouldn't this be detrimental to the patients? Wouldn't they be exploited? And I said, well, that was a risk that we had to take.
The casting conversation started coming up regarding Mick Murphy. And as I remember, I think we went first to Gene Hackman, who passed. Went to Marlon Brando, who passed. And going back now I think it was about a year before, Hal Ashby at one time had mentioned Jack Nicholson. Now you have to remember, Jack had done 5 Easy Pieces, Easy Rider, but his persona was sort of the sensitive young man or the intellectual that was a badass, you know. It wasn't R.P. McMurphy. But Hal had just started to do a picture called The Last Detail, and he said, you gotta take a look at this. That was the first picture where you really felt the size of Jack.
You're gonna pull that henhouse shit now?
Milos was very consumed with Burt Reynolds. Milos loved Burt Reynolds. And I remember him going off, he was doing Smokey and the Mess, and I said, look, I kind of know what you mean, but what is it? He said, yeah. He has cheap charisma. Cheap charisma. It is perfect for McMurphy.
No, Jack was really always my first choice. But, you know, when we were ready, we found out that he has commitment to make another movie. So if you want Jack, we have to wait 6 months or 7 months, you know. Then I started to think about other, you know, actors eventually, and I must tell it, you know, to the credit of Saul and Michael, you know, when I came back to them and said, listen, I would rather wait. They said, okay, we'll wait.
Soon after that, I think Milos felt that Larry Hobben had exhausted the extent of which he could work on the screenplay, and Bo Goldman was brought in.
Who we had not heard of at that time, and no one in the film business had heard of. And Milos said he's a good writer, and that's what we were looking for. We didn't know what we were going to get was a wonderful writer.
I always thought the reason they hired me to do Cuckoo's Nest is I was there, and I was down the road, and I was cheap. My fee was $8,000. It seemed like a lot of money, and it was going to keep me there for a few more weeks before I had to go back to shoveling the ice into the slabs of fish for the rich. And so I met Milos the first day. We met over at the Sunset Marquis Hotel. That was where he was living, on the ground floor. And we'd start talking, and Milos would sort of drift, and I always knew he was drifting because that meant 2 bikinis were walking by outside. You know, what do you think, Bo? Think he's a good idea? We would meet every day at 10 o'clock. He would, about 10:30, say, you want beer? And I'd say, no, thank you. And he'd have a beer, and he would fork this red cabbage and tear off some brown bread, and then we would go back to work.
He was always hungry.
Would use, you know, certain words like gesticulate. So I say, okay, and then McMurphy gesticulates. And he said, gesticulate, what mean, Bo? So I'd say, oh, it's great. So from then on, I remember for 6 weeks, every day he'd say, then what do you think, Bo? McMurphy gesticulate? And he loved, you know, to learn words. I worked right there. I had this yellow pad, and I would, you know, and he'd say, okay, we went scene by scene, rewriting each scene. And he would go into the little L of the entrance, and he'd come out and he'd be McMurphy, or he would be the nurse. And he's an actor, Milos, of course. And he would come out and he would turn into McMurphy and he would say, "So Harding, what do you think?" And he would do Martini.
How are we going to win? Entering the world of unknown.
I think we saw almost 3,000 actors.
We had readings in New York and LA with groups of guys sitting around a circle. Guys were sitting in chairs and seeing how they looked with each other and how they reacted with each other.
Milos had great, auditions. There were improvs. He was the big nurse, and he sat everybody around in the day room, and he asked us questions. That is not natural.
And then he would get the improvisation going and feed us, and get us going among each other and everything.
I had rebound Milos's Czech English dictionary for him. And he came to pick it up, and he said, and what do I owe you for this? And I said, no, Milos, please, it's nothing. He said, well, in that case, you have to be in my next movie.
Brad came from New York. And I remember one day going out and people in the waiting room, and there was this kid, who looked seriously disturbed, very disturbed. Brad
he picked an odd bunch.
Once you see him, you will never forget that face.
It's come from inside him. He's a genius. He is. I think he's like, yeah. Don't make that face when I say Milos is a genius. No, I'm only kidding. He didn't make a face.
Now, of course, in the middle of all this, the chief, the big Indian, was a question mark. And one of my trips back to New York, I sat next to a guy named Mel Lambert.
Wanted to know if I could help him make the picture. And I said, you bet, it all depends on what you want. But I'm not impressed with great movie stars, so I'll expect to be paid.
I told him what I was doing in this picture, and I'm looking for Indians. He said, well, Michael says, I grew up as an Indian. My father was an Indian agent. And I grew up, working on reservations and everything like that. And Mel Lambert Motors is the only car agency that sells cars to Indians in the Pacific Northwest because they know I can be trusted. So I said, that's great, Mel.
I didn't know that it will be such a nightmare. Because here I wanted to be, very faithful to the book, that the Indian really has to be big, tree trunk, right? Not knowing that Indians, basically, they are not very big. And we sent scouts everywhere.
5 months later, get a call. Said, Michael, yes, Mel Lambert Motors. Jesus, Michael, biggest son of a bitch I ever seen in my life walked in here the other day. This son of a bitch is big, Michael. He is big. God damn, I've never seen a guy like this in my life. And I said, name Will Sampson. He's from Yakima, Washington. He's a forest ranger. He's got paintings hanging in the Smithsonian. This son of a bitch, you gotta see this guy. He's something else.
When we went up there and got Will Sampson, he had just jumped out of jail, or they had just taken him out of jail for stealing a horse. He didn't really steal the horse, he just borrowed him, because he left him with a half a bale of hay.
Jack was with us, Jack Nicholson, and Milos and Saul, and Mel Lambert, who's also now turned, he's a pilot too, had a little plane, who's gonna pick us up. And I'll never forget, we got there, we arrived in Portland, I think about a half an hour before the flight from Yakima, Washington came in. And so we were waiting outside as the passengers started coming off. And when Will walked out that door,
here comes this big Indian. Wow, that was fabulous.
He had his cowboy boots and his hat on. It was about 7 feet. And there was a gasp. All of us just went together. Oh, my God.
And I see Milos giving it this, and at lunch, and he's sitting there framing old big Will Sampson.
And I remember Jack said, oh, my God, can he talk? And then, he doesn't have to talk. I said, that's right, he doesn't have to talk. Oh, my God, I don't believe it. And Jack was looking at him like a specimen from Mars. He kept walking around. I'm like, God damn, there he is. It's him. And he had this voice. Will was a great, regal, majestic man.
Okay. What do you want?
Repeat what you said.
Oh, artist, yes. Actor, no. I am first, last, and always a painter. Okay?
We had this little plane, little single-engine plane. And I'll never forget, we just all piled in, we were overcrowded.
Over us is lying Will Sampson. And this is the way we are, the plane almost couldn't get up in the air. This way we are flying to Salem.
There was 5 of us in a 4-place airplane. And I thought, well, I'll take Milos by and show he and Michael my house.
So we are flying somewhere, and you see this, Mike? Oh my God, where is my horse? The corral is empty. My horse is gone. We have to find the horse. And now we go like that, you know, just barely clearing the tops of the trees. You know, we didn't find the horse because Phil suddenly said, oh my God, I'm running out of fuel.
I had to babysit Will for 6 weeks before they started the picture. They were afraid he was going to get drunk and go steal somebody else's horse.
For the big nurse, that was interesting because, you know, we were all convinced that we have to have somebody who is really personification of evil. We offered the part, one after another, of course, to about 4 actresses who would, you know, fill this image.
Annie Bancroft, Colleen Dewhurst, Geraldine Page, Angela Lansbury.
They all turned it down.
If you cast your mind back to that period of time, Milos was not well known. And the book was frightening. The part was terrifying.
This was the beginning of the whole women's movement going on, and the whole idea of a woman playing a villain was not acceptable.
Then one day, I met Louis Fletcher.
Every time I would see him over a 6-month period, he would say, Louise, forget this movie, forget this part, you're not getting this part.
And I slowly, it was not immediate, decision, I slowly started to realize that it will be much more powerful if it's not this visible evil. That she's only an instrument of evil. She doesn't know that she's evil. She, as a matter of fact, believes that she's helping people. And something very evil, that's frightening. That's much more, that's much stronger for the drama, you know. So that was why we decided to offer the part to Louise.
I was the last person cast on Christmas Day, 1974. And I went to work up in Oregon the first week of January. I think it was January 3rd. And for a week, we had rehearsals.
To be there was really a sensation. Walk around, you know, we rehearsed, you know, the environment was really great. Right outside, people walking around the street, cars going by, the cage rooms, you're inside. It's very creepy to have that duality, that contrast, all that freedom, leafy trees. It looks like Walt put it there. Hey man, like Snow White come out and hang a laundry.
We did, at the very first movie the cast came from Salem was to give them tours of the ward. We had some people who looked rather strange in the cast, and they were scared of the patients. It wasn't the other way around.
The first week of
None of us knew what it was to be hospitalized. Everyone could imagine that they were insane, but the hospitalized experience, that experience was far from
Because we had these long, empty wings of this mental hospital, we were able to give, I think, each of the actors, or the most, every 2 actors, their own sort of dressing rooms, but the dressing rooms were the cells.
We all had our little cell, cubbyhole, kind of. You know, I had fixed it up, I had a few little things in it, and that was ours, like our dressing room.
After about 3 days, these several large tables appeared covered with personal items, photographs, cups, glasses, that sort of thing, books, and everyone went and chose their personal items to.
This was going to be something very special.
I had chosen, as technical advisor to the movie, certain patients on which the actors could model certain behaviors.
So I assigned, I always told, this actor, you just follow this guy and just learn how he walks, how he moves, how he speaks.
One of the patients that intrigued me the most, that I sort of wanted to pattern my character after, was a very obese type patient. He was very heavy set, and he was at the meeting. He sat in a very pensive, passive mood, and he's holding a pillow, and he was practically in his lap, and he had his head down in a very passive way, practically just sitting, sleeping and sitting, sitting and sleeping in a sleeping sitting position.
We were really immersed in it. It was really wonderful. Milos kept us inside, always inside the characters. It's so comfortable and wonderful for an actor to not have to break that.
All right, ready?
Somebody who might have just walked in might have had a difficult time discerning who were the inmates and who were the actors. It was kind of a close call there once in a while.
What everybody thought was a crazy decision, which was shooting an interior film, 90% interior film, in January when it's totally dark all the time, up on location, turned out to be one of the best decisions I think Saul and I made, and it just created an ambiance and an isolation for these people that was hard to match.
The fact that suddenly they were in this milieu of these poor souls brought such humility on the set. Everybody was humble. Everybody was, not excesses suddenly, nobody was trying to, be a big star. It was very beneficial for the film.
There's something holy about despair. Despair sings to the heavens.
We've been here on the grounds of Oregon State Hospital, which is a functioning institution for the incarceration of mentally disturbed people, or for the examination of people who have been charged with or convicted of crimes that are judged to be related to Cuckoo.
Crazy has to do with a hard day in July, a long, hot time. You hear every blade of grass screaming for water, and the cows are bellowing, and you know that it's getting away from you. And it's connected to the earth and to your heart.
How you feel? Rested.
They're trying as hard as they can not to look crazy and not to act crazy. They're trying to converse and laugh when it's time. And when you lose that, when you lose your sense of timing, you may look the same, but inside you know that I have lost something really important to the human soul. And that's crazy.
I think that the patients were thrilled to have the movie here. We had many of them who wanted to work on the film, and I think we had something like 89 on the payroll, either in the crew or working as extras in some of the scenes.
There's so many people behind the camera. You wouldn't know they were very different from the rest of us, and maybe they're not.
I insisted that in no way would we ever do anything that would denigrate a patient. They gave me that word, and they kept that.
I worked with electricians. Mainly I just moved stuff in, up, set it up, take stuff off the truck, a little bit of odd and ends. I was scared to death because I thought, well, here's these movie stars, and all I am is just a little patient.
I work with prop department. It's just so different than what I thought it was going to be, because I thought, well, here comes a movie outfit, and here comes Hollywood, upper class people and all, and here I am way down here, and this is what I, really thought, and come to find out that they weren't up there and I wasn't down here. We were just kind of you know, on an even plane.
Within days, I just felt part of the family, part of this Cuckoo's Nest family. It was a big morale booster.
No illusions, we have enough illusions. I said, allusions, Milos, what the guy's alluding to, what he's saying. Oh, allusions. So that became like gesticulate, you know. So it's a, so what, you think allusions? He is making allusions, you know. And, but it'd be interesting because I never realized until later, you know, that there was this sort of play on words, what Harding is using all the time.
I'm talking about form. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about interrelationships. I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand?
Harding is the best role for an actor. Every time you see a play done with it, the person that is Harding is usually the best of the actors in that troupe.
Bill Redfield, who was playing Harding, got a bad cold one Friday, and then turned sort of like pneumonia, almost, and went to the hospital, and then we got a call. Dean Brooks went down to see him to find out that he had leukemia and was dying.
I immediately then notified Michael and Saul as to the problem, and that was a secret that was held to the end of the movie.
For about 2 weeks, we just changed the schedule, shot without him.
Billy, you know, begged us to let him try to finish the picture. And we said, the doctor's prognosis is, you know, it's terminal. You may not make the picture. And we didn't know what to do. There was a lot of scenes, we didn't know whether to stop and have to start to go back again or go through, and decided to take the chance.
Mr. Harding.
I couldn't explain them exactly what I mean. I said, but listen, would you mind to add one more day shooting these guys? You think it's really important? I think it is. Okay, do it.
I was just, you know, so thrilled that this guy got out of there. You know, just took that fucking thing and busted that fucking window out and got the fuck out of here.
First public screening was in Paris, and the film ends, the Indian is running into the woods, and the music dies down, and in the silence, the credit comes up, which usually people start to applaud. Nobody applauds. And I'll tell you, in a few seconds, my soles and Michael's shirt were wet, because in the middle of the credits, even the lights went on halfway so that people can leave who wants to leave. You know, we start to look around. Nobody's really leaving, so, but nobody applauds. And then the final credit disappears, and it takes another 2 seconds before the curtain starts to move that it's end. You know, the moment the curtain started to move, it just exploded, the whole theater. And in that moment, we knew that we might have something not to be ashamed of.
In Chicago, I knew that this was out of control, this success of this movie, when the people actually stood up at when the Indian throws the water thing out. That's such a wonderful moment.
We were walking up 3rd Avenue to go to where the movie was playing, and there was an earlier show, and we heard people coming down the block talking about the movie. It was very bizarre because they were all like blown away by it.
East, west, north, south, didn't make any difference. Everyone reacted the same way at the same second throughout the world.
That picture has had international appeal and continues so. It was 20 years ago. People still stop me every day and say, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, what a film.
It seems now it's all very hard with 9 Academy Award nominations and all of its success. It's very hard to imagine that this was a picture that did not want to be made.
Milos Forman. Well, now it's really, now let me watch. This lady, I wish so much she win.
The winner is Louise Fletcher.
When she did her famous speech, of course, she had told me that about her parents being deaf. It made me realize that sort of distant quality, that sort of waxen quality that Nurse Ratched had. Well, that comes from somebody who related all through their childhood with somebody who they could actually talk to.
Jack refused. He wasn't going to go. He'd lost 4 times, I think, before for Best Actor. He never won. He hated it. And I said, you got to go. There's 9 nominations.
Jack Nicholson and
I read the book when it was originally published. Of course, I was too young to play the part then, but I've always liked this character. I don't think an actor can go wrong really playing a combination of Hamlet and Christ.
The winner is 1-2 over the Cuckoo.
I think that the benefits that derived both to the patients and to, I think, the staff of the hospital so far outweighed all the risks that we had to take.
I got numerous letters and from people that I dearly respect who thought the film was absolutely great for psychiatry and for the mentally ill.
One of the guys, and it's hard for me to talk about, didn't talk to anyone. We put him to work. At the end of the picture, he was telling guys what to do.
I got out, a little over a year after Cuckoo's Nest left here. I got out in '76, early part of '76, and then came back to work at the Oregon State Hospital about 4 months later. And I've been here 21 years now as a staff member. R.P. McMurphy came into my life, and I do some R.P. McMurphy from time to time, and I have over the last 20 years and so forth, working with the people that I work with, and it works.
I retired from the hospital as its superintendent. I've been superintendent of the hospital for 27 years and retired in October of '81. When I was superintendent, we prided ourselves on being an open hospital. I must tell you that I was a bit miffed at having to get a visitor's pass to be on the grounds today. I don't see as many patients on the grounds. We used to have patients all over the grounds. And I see more fences around the hospital. I don't think that Cuckoo's Nest would be made here today. It takes a combination of will and effort.
I basically want to dedicate it to anybody else who's got a dream and somebody tells them it's not possible. I'm just grateful to all those people, my father and Saul and all the wonderful actors, and to Ken Kesey, who never was acknowledged proper the night of the Academy Awards, is true, to Ken for writing a great, great book and for being such an instrumental part of my life.
It's not about insanity. It's about the triumph of the individual, the triumph of the human spirit.
So there was this design implicit in following McMurphy's story, McMurphy's collision with the nurse, McMurphy's interaction with the other patients, McMurphy's unconsciously and unconsciously reluctantly taking on this mantle of a hero. In itself, in some way, I think any great story, there's no deviation from it. There's no choices. It has to come out that way. Like if a man lives a good and honest life, he's going to come out okay, even if his career gets destroyed, if he loses his children, if he loses his wife, he'll come out okay because he's written the right script for himself. And that's what McMurphy has done. And Brobden recognizes that.
The real spark for that book came when I'd been over at the Pendleton Roundup with my dad. And on the way back on the bus, going down the Columbia Gorge toward Portland, there was a big scene up in front of us, and they stopped the bus, and there were cop cars and ambulances, and the bus driver got out and asked this, I think it was a construction worker, that was walking along and talking to people, because they were in the process of building the dam, the first big dam on the Columbia, which wiped out Celilo Falls, and which was where I had been watching ever since I was a kid, watching the Indians get out there on the rocks and scoop and stick those big salmon. And the guy says, oh, some drunk Indian got out in the road with a knife in his teeth and ran right straight into the grill of one of our trucks. And it's so perfect seeing this big line of people, over here this construction job going on, building the dam, and the story that this Indian took on modern American machine, head on, with a knife in his mouth. And from that, I gradually expanded it into the Cuckoo's Nest idea.